As a former overthinker and having helped many overthinkers out of that pattern, I know firsthand that one of the most frustrating aspects of overthinking is how little the people around you understand the way your mind works. And the very term overthinking is a perfect example of that, because my personal opinion is that it was probably coined by someone who wasn't an overthinker, because they would not have named it that way otherwise. Because the word overthinker doesn't really match the inner experience of overthinking, because it would imply that you are thinking too much, as in more than is necessary. That's what too much would mean. That's what overthinking would mean, that you are thinking more than is necessary. How could this be when the thinking that you've been doing has obviously been insufficient? If you had done enough thinking, would you not already know what to do? Would you not have been able to make that decision? If you had done enough thinking, would there not be some peace of mind? If you're still thinking, that means that your mind obviously hasn't done its job yet. So how could it be excessive? How could it be too much thinking? How could it be overthinking? And you know what? It's true, your thinking hasn't been able to do the job. But we need to understand why if we want to solve it. The truth is that overthinking means that your thinking either is not doing its job properly, as in it's not enough, but poor quality thinking, or it's trying to do a job that it simply cannot do. Essentially, it's biting more than it can chew. Or the third possibility is that it's trying to do a job that doesn't belong to it. And it can also be a combination of the three, obviously. Cause number one, poor quality thinking, is ironically something that often affects smart people, precisely because they are smart. So their mind is very powerful, it's very effective. But what that means is that it hasn't been trained properly. So they've been getting away with unstructured thinking. So what essentially that means is that thinking, if you're smart, it's often more like not a thinking, but a looking for. That means you point your mind in the general direction of a problem and you just wait for it to come up with a solution. And most of the time it works. You can just look at the problem and a solution comes up. And so you scan and you look at the problem and you look for a solution. But maybe you don't find a solution. So then what happens? Well, you don't know what to do except looking again and again and again and again, and perhaps more intensely, but essentially you're doing the same thing over and over again and hoping it will lead to a solution. So it's essentially what happens when you really, really need a solution, but you can't find it, is that it throws you for a loop, because your thinking is not really thinking, it's looking for. So cause number two is what I like to call the rocket scientist fallacy. It's something that I definitely used to feel victim to. And essentially, it's an overinflated sense of what your thinking can do. And actually, that overinflated sense can come initially from knowledge. Like, I have a STEM background. I studied math and physics at a pretty high level. And so I was fascinated by something like the laws of physics, like the Newtonian laws of physics, because when you will have some very, very basic equations, essentially you can launch rockets into space, and you can calculate the precise trajectory. And so that sort of gives you a sense that anything is possible if you know the right laws, if you know the laws of physics, if you can master anything. It gives you, if you have the right equations, it gives you a power over reality. Because in a sense, it is true. Physics is immensely powerful. You can do so many things with it. It's a source of all of our technology. We've achieved incredible things with it. And so I use physics as an example of, A thing that thinking can do that is immensely powerful and that gives us the illusion that your mind can apply itself to anything and find a solution. But the truth is, there is only so much that logic and science and thinking can do. And the perfect illustration from this is the weather. The weather is very unpredictable because it is a chaotic system, essentially. So basically, we can send rockets to the moon with no problem. We can predict with incredible accuracy the trajectory of planets for the next 1,000 years, literally. We can do that. But we cannot predict the weather for more than something like a week, even though it's much closer than us, and actually it's all around us. And even then, we can predict it with very questionable accuracy. So essentially, what this particular cause of overthinking is incorrectly assuming that you are trying to calculate the trajectory of a rocket when you're actually trying to predict the weather 2 years from now. Cause number 3 of overthinking is when thinking is essentially trying to do something that is not thinking's job. And so what it usually means is that there are some psychological or emotional issues at play that are impeding you from doing what you need to do and from making the decisions that you need to make. And so what I know from experience is that there are two main problems that are usually causing this. The first one is that you need to realize that when we make decisions, it's not actually just with rationality. And I don't just mean that we are often irrational and that we have biases, but literally, most of the times our decisions are made and should be made according to what we want and need. It's not about what makes the more sense, because what makes the more sense for someone could be different for someone else. And so oftentimes you can't make a decision because you don't actually know what you want or need, which oftentimes is a result of some unresolved issue. So that's the first family of problems. And the second one, which is often related, is your relationship with uncertainty. Essentially, if you are too uncomfortable with uncertainty, well, you can't make a decision, because decisions almost always involve some uncertainty, especially the big important ones that you absolutely do need to make. Simply put, it can go wrong, and it can go wrong no matter how much you think about it beforehand. And you can't know how it will go. Which is why making an important choice always requires some courage. The thing is, the smarter people, they often need more courage than regular people. Because the smarter you are, the more proficient you are at anticipating all the ways in which it could go wrong. Which means you find more to be fearful about. So any emotional issue, any fear you have is amplified, and you need to compensate with some courage. But also, the paradox is that if you're smarter, then you've probably been more proficient at skirting the problem, at figuring out ways to control for those things that are threatening you, that you can see in the future. And so you found more ways to be secure. So that also means that, yes, you need more courage, but your courage muscle is atrophied from underuse, essentially. So this makes for a very dangerous cocktail, because you are bound at some point to encounter situations where you can find a lot to fear, but no solution that would be safe and certain. No way to insure yourself against the risk. And so to get out of this, you absolutely have to work on your courage. So when you think about it, the causes 2 and 3, they do admittedly give some more relevance and credence to the term overthinking, but only from a certain perspective. So it's not thinking too much in the sense that you're thinking past the point where it's useful. It's thinking too much in the sense that you're trying to use a tool that isn't fit for the job. Either way, if you are overthinking, you are exerting effort needlessly. Here are the two golden rules to avoid getting trapped in overthinking. The first thing is that you need to think properly. So don't be lazy about it. Don't just look at something and loop around it. Be structured in your thinking. Try to know what you're doing. Right? If you have to, ask yourselves the right questions. Don't just keep it in your mind, looping and looping lazily. And the second one is try and think only when it's a job for thinking. I acknowledge that this is easier said than done. Those are skills, and I know from experience teaching them to my clients that, well, learning to do this takes a lot of study and practice. But at the very least, understanding the goal, understanding the target allows you to focus your efforts in the right direction. So the solution is not to run harder in your little hamster wheel, and it's not trying to think less. It's about trying to think properly and knowing when to think and knowing when thinking is not what the situation requires. It's also about developing the other tools, knowing how to use and recognize your emotions and stuff like that, and working on anything around it that allows you to, well, not try to use thinking when it's not thinking's job. So I hope this was useful, and please let me know in the comments if this resonated with you.